Hello, lords and lovelies, and welcome back at this new year that we have to the Knights of the Round podcast with Ravah and my beautiful co-host Arthur.
Yes. No, it's very good to be back. We apologize for the immense delay between episodes. It has been a eventful year for us. But we're back, and we've got a host of new episodes that are going to be coming out here soon on a reliable basis. So please do keep checking back. First off, though, I think before we get really into this episode, I do want to do a very special shout out and a very special mention to somebody who absolutely makes this podcast completely possible and without whom we would struggle immensely. We probably wouldn't be able to bring it to you at the quality that we do. Our sound guy / equipment guy / best friend, Hunter, if you want to.
Hey, everybody!
that was. But no, honestly, without Hunter, we would not be able to do this podcast, especially not to the quality that we do it. So I really wanted to say thank you to him.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
He makes this all possible. That being said,
so we are going to get into probably the first topic I came up with when I started this podcast.
When we started
the podcast. I started, no. But the problem was my lovely boyfriend was a bunch of pleb and had not had a very good anime education.
You say that, but I did. It just wasn't as thorough as yours.
You hadn't finished Cowboy Bebop when we started dating, so. But anyway, this is, and welcome to the definitive. You don't need to listen to any more. There's no, you don't need to listen to any other videos. This is going to be the definitive FullMetal Alchemist versus Brotherhood podcast.
Absolutely. No, this was it's one of the topics that Ravah was particularly excited about talking about because FullMetal Alchemist is her favorite anime. She's got a big old tattoo on her thigh.
It was my first one. Yes,
it was her first tattoo. And just gonna tell on myself, I stopped watching both series at the exact same point in the story. And spoiler alerts, obviously, we are going to be talking about both of these shows in immense detail. We're going to be comparing the two, and then we're going to be laying out which one we think is the better story, the better show.
I will actually be in my notes. I'm going to be keeping points for what we say works better in which show. And at the end, we will kind of reveal which series has the most points. Mm-hmm. So do be cautious as you continue forward. If you have not finished either series, we will be spoiling it for you. If that's not something you care about, or if you've seen both series, then please keep listening. If you haven't finished the series and don't want spoilers, I do encourage you. They're both on Netflix. Go watch them and then come back and listen to the podcast.
They're both excellent. They're both easily in our top 5, both of our lists of top 5 anime we've ever watched. And just to be clear, the two anime are both fantastic. It's not that one is good and the other one's not. I mean, we're comparing a 9.6 and a 9.5 here. I mean, it's gonna be close. However, I will lay out a couple of trigger warnings beforehand because there are some dark and heavy material brought up in these shows, including war, murder, genocide, self-harm. If any of that stuff bothers you, then just beware that we are going to be talking about that stuff throughout this episode.
That being said, let us get started. First, we're going to do the broad section first. We're just going to talk about the plots of each show. So one of the things that I've noticed, because I was a hardcore fan of the show, I watched the original on Toonami as it was coming out.
The 2003 version.
It is the one series that I own every single volume of the manga, as well as there are 3
movies.
Novels.
Novels.
Yeah. Yes, there are 3 novels associated with the series. I have all of those. I have both of the movies, as well as most of the original series on DVD. Just because this was back when they were selling, here's 4 episodes for $20. Here's 4 episodes, not here's the entire series for $150. Which, when I was first watching the series, I was in, middle school and high school. I didn't have that kind of pocket change. But one of the things, if you weren't aware of the difference between the two series, the series was produced as the manga was still coming out. The original series was. So that is why there's such a big difference, is that they are very similar up to a certain point, and then they really heavily diverge because there was no manga material. So rather than doing what a lot of long-running shonen do, which is filling that with filler until
the
more manga
catch
comes
up.
out. They just decided to kind of make their own anime original ending, which I've seen in several different shows where they'll do either lots of filler or they'll do anime original endings. And the original series is one that went with the anime original ending because while the original does have some filler, it's not Naruto style filler where it's hundreds of episodes of nonsense that has nothing to do with the plot.
It's more like Avatar: The Last Airbender filler. That is to say, there's like one, maybe 2 episodes that could be counted in big air quotes as filler.
Towards the beginning, yeah.
But it still gives us a lot of characterization. It really does drive home a lot of knowledge and lets us know about the characters. And it is still mentioning events that do canonically happen in the show. In fact,
Yes.
Brotherhood, while it doesn't show us these episodes, it does make passing reference to the events of them, meaning that the events of those episodes were technically canon to the plot. But apart from the nitty gritty, really what we have here are 2 similar shows up to a certain point, and then they diverge, I think, pretty hardcore in terms of tone. They still have a lot of similarities, but one becomes more of a character-focused drama, whereas the other one becomes more of a traditional action show, but with a little bit more heavy, serious, grounded elements in it.
What's interesting is both shows diverge pretty much around the same part, and that is the death of Maze Hughes, which coincidentally is where in both series where Arthur stopped watching.
Just stopped. Like, it's, why are they marrying Daddy? And I'm just, nope, that's it. I'm done. And just stopped watching both shows at the exact same point in time when Maze Hughes unfortunately dies off. You get the best character. And I would just stop watching after that point, and I never continued until here recently, where Ravah thankfully bullied me into watching it. She can be a bit of a bully. But after that point, I went and completed the entirety of both series. And thankfully, because now they are, like I said before, both in my top 5.
So let's get down into the plot, because we did say we were going to compare the plot. So let's kind of come back around to that. So again, the plots are at a certain point very different. They start off with the same central plot. You know, they want to find the 2 brothers. They want to find the Philosopher's Stone to fix and undo the mistake of losing both of their bodies. However, that journey becomes very different. So let's talk about the plot of the original as it refers to the differences. Like, we don't need to talk about the general plot, but like the specific plot for the original 2003 version of the show.
And if y'all hear us refer to it as 2003, that's because that's the year that the show started airing in. So if we talk about the 2003 show, that we're talking about the original anime, not Brotherhood.
So it really diverges. Because they didn't know a lot of things that were going to happen. For example, they knew that Ed had a bad relationship with his father, but they didn't really know what to do with that because Hohenheim had not been introduced in the manga by the time that the series was in production. So we'll actually talk more about Hohenheim a little bit later. They knew that the homunculi were artificially created humans. That is also, again, just a general alchemic term in realistic science. But they didn't really know how they were created because, again, that had not been revealed in the manga. And that plot-wise, because it is a huge part of the plot, is incredibly different. So in the original, each of the homunculi was created by a person who tried to bring someone back to life and failed, and the homunculi is their creation.
The mutilated body of their creation. For those who have seen the anime, but maybe not having seen the original 2003. But whenever somebody attempts human transmutation, tries to bring somebody back from dead, all they really end up doing is creating this mangled pile of meat and bones.
I literally just said that.
And it's revealed in the 2003 version that if you just leave that mangled pile to its own devices, I guess, it eventually just... No?
No, they have to specifically be fed unfinished Philosopher's Stones
Oh,
created
that's
with
right.
red water to take that form. Because you see the villain of the series actually
feeding the
feeding the
stones
stones to the homunculi who eventually becomes Sloth, who the Elric brothers have created.
That's right. That's right.
Whereas
I
in
did forget that little detail.
Yes, in Brotherhood, they are pieces of the main villain in his attempt to become the perfect being. He must remove all sin from himself. So they are the embodiments of those sins that the villain has attempted to remove from himself. So they become very, very different. And personally, I actually like how they are set up and how they play out in Brotherhood, in the original, better than in Brotherhood.
It certainly does add a lot more personal stakes in every single one of the homunculi, knowing what went into creating them. These aren't just like the creations of the bad guy. These are not just his minions. These are our loved ones. These are people who were loved so much that in desperation, those who survived them tried to bring them back. And then in a cruel twist of fate, the antagonist went around and basically corrupted their bodies and turned them into her servants.
Well, she doesn't really corrupt their body. She allows them to basically take form. What she does is sort of manipulate their wants and desires so that they will work for her. Because most of them do want to become human eventually. There are some that, they don't care. They're like, I got an immortal body. Why would I want to become human? Being greed and wrath actually have no desire to become human. Well, wrath kind of does, but we'll get to that. But she kind of manipulates those desires into her favor, as well as the homunculi's personal hatred for some of the main characters, which I think creates a much more interesting dynamic than just these are villains. Now, I don't want to get mistaken. There are still several complex homunculi in Brotherhood that we will talk about, but I think that they have such a personal connection, specifically Sloth.
Oh, Sloth. We have to talk about Sloth.
So, Sloth in the original was the product of the creation that Ed and Al made when they were boys, when they tried to bring back their mom. And I think that's such a beautiful moment of them having to confront that mistake that they made.
Like literally confront the mistake.
When they have to eventually confront her. So the homunculi are all able to be taken out in the original by being in contact with a piece of the person of the body of the person they were made from. So you have this.
I don't mean to interrupt, but leading to probably one of the most gut-wrenching scenes I've ever seen in any anime, where Ed, how old is he? 14-year-old?
At which point?
In 2003,
at which point in the series?
When he exhumes the body of his mother.
He's 16 at that point in the series.
So this 16-year-old child digging up the corpse of his mother to get one of her bones in order to put her soul to rest. Gut-wrenching to watch that.
I wouldn't really say it's not really clear that is her soul. She does have pieces of Trisha Elric's memories, but that's actually one of the questions are these incomplete versions of the person they tried to bring back to life, or are they their own separate beings? And the series never really
gives a definitive answer.
Because in the original, the homunculi are specifically artificial humans without souls. The without soul part is what makes them a homunculus.
That's true.
Hi, it's me. I'm Ravah. I'm the dictionary encyclopedia of FullMetal Alchemist. How you doing?
But I mean, again, like you said, that's the principal question. And how would she have Trisha Elric's memories if there was not a piece of Trisha Elric left in her?
It's also complicated because they don't.
But that's the thing. They don't give a clear answer.
And I don't think we need a clear answer, because I think they want us to ask that question of. And Ed himself asks that same question. There is a specific way with a very specific transmutation circle that you can kill the homunculi, and several homunculi are killed that way in the original. But he has to turn a woman with the memories and face of his own mother into methane gas and let her evaporate into the atmosphere.
Technically not killing her, but just literally separating all of her molecules and spreading them throughout the atmosphere. I cannot think of a more terrifying way to go.
And the fact that that person has the face and the,
The
memories of your
his
mother.
Oh man, it's heart wrenching. Meanwhile, flipping over to Brotherhood, and Sloth is a
big unga bunga.
big unga bunga man. I smash.
Though I do love that he's really fast because it's supposed to play off like, haha, he's sloth and he's slow. Just kidding. He's the
Just
fastest
kidding. He moves like a
homunculus,
fucking freight train.
which is actually a really cool addition and a play on that character. And I think calling him sloth in Brotherhood does make more sense because he does better embody the idea
Quote
of
unquote
sloth.
Yeah.
But he's also very different because, again, he wasn't in the manga by the time that the series was produced.
Yeah, they didn't know because, like you said, they hadn't introduced the character of Sloth. So obviously, we've got greed and pride and wrath and envy. Well, obviously, we've got to get the other and lust. We've got to get the other sins in here. And so they just decided, screw it. Let's just make
We didn't have wrath and pride yet in the manga. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Technically, you're right because wrath and pride are
wrath
swapped.
Well, not really. Wrath in the original anime is an anime only character. You never see that version of Wrath. In Brotherhood, Wrath is the Führer, and Pride is a Brotherhood. The character of Pride is a Brotherhood only character, whereas his counterpart in the original is just Salim Bradley. He's just a little kid.
But when I say that, I mean that spoiler alert again. The Führer.
We've already given the spoiler alert. We don't need to do it again.
The Führer in 2003's was Pride, and the Führer in Brotherhood is Wrath. So they swapped their roles, and that's what I was referring to, is the fact that their quote unquote associated sin was swapped. And then yes, 2003 had a unique, or technically two unique homunculi, one being Sloth and the other one being, for them, Wrath. Being the child of Izumi Curtis, the woman who trains Ed how to be an alchemist, Ed and Al how to be alchemists. Meanwhile, in Brotherhood, it's Salim Bradley, the quote-unquote child of the Führer, technically the first homunculus that the big bad evil guy creates, which would be Pride.
So ultimately, I think I like the homunculi's backgrounds. I like their character, that they have those specific connections. You have even Lust has that very specific connection to Scar because she was the woman that his brother loved that he tried to bring back, and that's what he did. And I think the homunculi themselves are done better than the original.
Oh, absolutely. There is that direct connection with so many of the main characters between Sloth and Envy, having direct connections to the Elric brothers, having Lust, like you said, be directly connected with Scar, having we're not really certain who Pride,
Envy, and Gluttony and Greed are all made by Dante and Hohenheim.
But
some combination of the two of them.
Yeah, but I mean, Envy has a pretty direct connection in their own mind to Edward and Alric. So there is these gripping, like, heartfelt connections of, like, I know who you are, now I have to destroy the monster you've become. Whereas in Brotherhood, they are compelling, and a lot of them have these interesting character introspective moments, but nowhere near to the fidelity that 2003 has.
All right. We're going to Steve Harvey. Look up what the scoreboard survey says. We're giving that point to the original.
We are giving that point to the original.
Feel free to disagree with us in the comments, but this is my podcast, and we will say whatever we want.
So the characters just have a lot more personal stake in the story in the 2003.
So let's talk about, since we're on the subject of the homunculi, let's talk about the main antagonists of the story, who end up becoming incredibly different in both series. They are two completely separate characters. The only really big things that they have in common are they're trying to create, actually, Father's not really even trying to create a philosopher's stone. They both have a connection to Hohenheim, and that's about
that's
the
it.
connection.
The only similarity between the two antagonists is that they are somehow connected to Hohenheim.
And they control the homunculi.
And they control the homunculi. Like, that's as specific as it gets. Let's talk with 2003's antagonist, Dante.
So, some of the things I said about Dante. One, I think actually, if we're talking about like D&D classifications for alignment, I actually think Dante's a more evil antagonist. But let me explain. I think she's more evil because her motives are selfish and in a human way, whereas Father is not human, even a little bit. So his motivations are, again, very different. It kind of reminds me of the people who are like, well, Thanos was actually right. That's kind of what I get there. But Dante, she's just a human who wants to live forever and is willing to wipe out entire nations
in order to make sure that she's immortal.
Personally stays immortal. And
it's a very selfish.
She's a female Voldemort.
She's a female Voldemort. It's 100% what it is. She's a female.
She even has 7 homunculi.
She even has 7 homunculi. Look. She is literally a female Voldemort. That's and the fact that is the summation of her ambitions is just to be immortal. It creates this very despisable character. Like to some degree, like you said, like, well, Thanos was right all along. It's just a certain degree you could almost understand, like, oh yeah, Father and his megalomania, and he wants to become God. That's all well and good, but how petty of a reason is I will sacrifice millions of people so that I can just stay young forever. It is a very much a quick way to turn your Voldemort into an Umbridge, which everybody I've ever talked to has agreed that Umbridge is a far more despicable character than Voldemort ever was.
So in Dante's defense, because I know a lot of people don't like her as a villain, but I think there are 2 things that not necessarily make her a better villain, but I think that are done better. I think she's a more malicious, or not malicious, she's a more detestable villain.
Oh, yeah.
And I love her personal connection to the main characters. Not to say that Father, the villain in Brotherhood, doesn't have a personal connection, but I feel like the connection that Father has with the Elric brothers in Brotherhood is more of he was created kind of sort of in a very convoluted way by my dad, and we have to stop him because that's the right thing to do. We have to save the world because we're heroes and that's what we do. Whereas Dante makes it very personal.
Absolutely. There is no, we have to stop Dante so we can save the world. It is, I want to kill Dante because she's a horrible bitch. Like it's a very much more of they're stopping her because of a very personal reason to them. There is no grandiose weird, not until like the very, very end where they learn in 2003 what the Gate of Truth does and what it connects to and how alchemy is created, which again, it's completely different than in Brotherhood. It's not until like the last couple of episodes that they find out that the alchemy that they use is fueled by the deaths of a parallel world, which is actually our Earth. And so for every time somebody dies on our planet, it gives them the power to use alchemy. And every time she does this big alchemical ritual in order to prolong her life, it causes massive murder, and she's basically about to cause World War II to prolong her life.
Right.
It's only upon them realizing that she's about to murder a bunch of people that they go, okay, now we really have to stop her. Up until that, which was like one of the last 3 episodes, it's entirely she's made our life hell. She caused our dad to walk out on us. We just want to kill her because we want to kill her.
I wouldn't necessarily say they're actually mad about that. I think Ed is more mad personally that his dad made that choice, but regardless. However, I want to...
We'll get to Hohenheim in a minute.
In the defense of the villain from Brotherhood, Father is a much more threatening villain.
Oh, the Father is a far more threatening villain.
Like just him walking around and doing alchemy with making no movements. He just
doesn't even clap
stands there.
His hands together. He just kind of sits there and thinks, and things happen.
He can turn off the main character's protagonist powers and turn off their alchemy.
He can literally just flip off the main character switch. Like the only time I've ever seen somebody do that was Aizen in Bleach, where he stopped the theme music.
He stopped Ichigo's theme music.
He is a far more imposing villain. Like he definitely lives up to like, okay, I can see that this guy can take over the world.
Yes,
absolutely. Like, and technically he does. If it wasn't for Hohenheim having set a plan to stop him in motion over the course of like
hundreds of years,
hundreds of years, then he would have won. Bam, boom, the end. He's now the Abrahamic God.
Well, it's a combination of Hohenheim's plan plus Jingi's alchemy, which Father does not know about.
Yeah.
Because it in the lore of that show, when Father and Hohenheim separate, Father goes to Amestris and creates alchemy, and Hohenheim goes to Jing and creates alchemy, which is more devoted to healing and using the energy from the earth. It's a really cool concept. I'll get to that here in a second when we're talking about
Hohenheim.
That too. But anyways, but yeah, no. He also gets the proper development throughout the course of the series. They kind of just 30 episodes into this 50 episode series go, oh hey, here's the real villain. Actually, no. So you meet Dante in the episode Dante of the Deep Forest. You meet her, but you don't know she's the villain
until
for like 10 more episodes after that.
Even more, honestly. Like you're in like the last quarter of the anime.
You're in the end game.
It's not until after Al becomes the Philosopher's Stone did they actually find out about Dante. So I mean, you're talking about there is so much that happens between you, quote unquote, meeting Dante and then finding out, oh, surprise, that was the main villain all along. Because when you first meet Dante, she's like this wrinkled old woman, and you find out that she taught Izumi how to perform alchemy. And you don't think much about it. You think she's died.
You think greed kills her.
Greed kills her.
Actually, the characters think that greed kills her. The audience thinks that she's killed by Lyra, who is a 2003 original character that you see at the very beginning of the series working with Yoki, one of the corrupt filler villains.
Well, technically, she's not 2003 original because she is. Is she?
Yes, she is.
I thought that she was in Brotherhood as well.
No, because they actually so they don't show the Use Well Mind episode in Brotherhood.
You're right. You're right.
It's kind of one of those. It's one of my problems with Brotherhood is that they're like, you've already seen the original series, so we're going to kind of brush past a lot of this stuff. But no, she's not in the original.
You're right.
Or she's not in the original manga. Yeah. I wish to say she's not in Brotherhood.
They take this background, one-off filler character, and like it all's part of the villain's master plans. To a certain degree, I kind of like the fact that you can't dismiss any character in the show. Any one of them could become important at any point in time. That's a really cool thing for an anime to do. The only time I've ever seen something similar to that is technically with One Piece of all things, where they'll have a character in the background, and then 500 chapters later, you find out, oh, that was like the first mate on Gold Roger's crew. He's actually super important to this story.
But anyway, we can talk about One Piece later.
We can talk about One Piece in the One Piece podcast.
I'm sorry, Will and Chris. We're not talking about One Piece right now.
But I'm just saying that that's such a rare thing that you never see that kind of, oh, you remember this one character from like 35 episodes ago? Surprise, bitch. Now they're the villain.
She wasn't, but she's not the villain. Lyra is not the villain.
Lyra's not the villain.
Her
body gets taken over by the villain.
She actually does get murdered at the end of the series when Dante takes over her body.
Yeah, but the characters in universe and technically the audience don't know until that gets revealed way there towards the end. It's such a great reveal. But as far as going back to Father, I really enjoy the fact that he ties directly into Hohenheim's story and Hohenheim's redemption. And we'll talk more about Hohenheim in a minute, but like there is still very much a personal connection between Hohenheim and both of these villains. And there is this sense of, if we do not stop Father, it's more than just our little family that's going to be affected. The whole world is going to be affected. The whole country is going to be killed.
I was about to say, it's the country. He doesn't quite get to the world, but he does use the country, like the sacrifices of the country, to open the door, the alchemic door that the planet has, which is a thing.
Literally absorb the powers of God and truth,
right?
And becomes omnipotent. But the fact that when you first meet Father, he looks literally exactly like Hohenheim, and for a while, you're not even entirely sure, like, is that actually Hohenheim? Did he just, like, snap and go crazy?
They just call him Father. Like, it's supposed to be. You're supposed to think,
they just
is
called him
that
Father.
Hohenheim?
Are these my siblings? And meanwhile, Envy from 2003 is just screaming in the background.
One of the things, though, that Brotherhood does, it's a very nice background detail that you only notice if you're a nerd like me and you've watched the series several times. is that Father's hair color is a different shade of blonde than Hohenheim's. Hohenheim's hair color is the same shade of blonde as Ed's.
Yes.
And you, of course, don't know about Al because he's a giant suit of armor who doesn't have hair. But
Well,
that's one of the ways.
Flashbacks to back before he was a giant suit of armor with no hair.
Right. But
they had the same hair color.
But when you meet them both in universe, Hohenheim and Edward have the same color hair. So it's like, oh, and they also, they have those shared features, which is a cool visual way to tell that is not Hohenheim because he doesn't look just like Edward.
There are just slight differences that go, wait a minute, something's not quite right here.
Right.
And I think part of the reason why I like Hohenheim as a villain more than Dante.
Father.
My bad.
Father.
To be fair, in 2003, Hohenheim is kind of a villain.
Not really, but we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that when we talk about him. But the reason why I like Father more as a villain than Dante is the fact that he does get a lot more screen time than her. You do get a lot more time seeing him do his evil deeds, and you do get he has, in my opinion, a much better and more compelling backstory. He is literally this tiny little sprite in a trapped in a flask, and using nothing but his mind and his deceit and his trickery, he manages to have this immense immortal body that has this crazy amount of power in and of itself. And like you can really sense the ambition, the threat, the malice. He has so much more presentation than Dante. If we're going to take a look at Megaminds, what makes a supervillain, he has a lot more presentation. Especially that famous pose where he's like leaning on his hand, and like you really feel
when you
like
first see him,
you really feel like you've stepped into the audience of God. But Dante is just like, she's a threat, but she's really just a threat to the Elric brothers.
Well, she is trying to use she's trying to use entire nations to create Philosopher's Stones, so she is kind of a threat to thousands of people. But
true, but at no point did I ever stop to think that, like, hey, Ed, if you had just like grabbed a couple of buddies before you came to this fight, you would have steamrolled her. Or a gun. You would have just steamrolled this. Like, look me in the eyes and tell me that if Ed and Al hadn't brought Mustang to that fight, it wouldn't have been over like that.
That actually goes back to the Voldemort theory, because what if Harry had just brought out an AK and used that to fight Voldemort instead of magic? If Ed had just brought an AK and been like, we're ending this now.
We're ending this now. Let's go out. But no, like, and meanwhile, flipping over to Father and Brotherhood, they bring everybody. They bring Azumi and her husband. They bring the Armstrongs. They bring the entire force of basically the Amestris military. They bring Mustang and Hawkeye, all these super powerful alchemists, and Father wipes the floor with them.
Well, so they do bring all of those units together, but to do a different thing in the original. All of those units do come together in the coup to overthrow the Fuhrer.
Yes, in the coup to overthrow the Fuhrer.
But not to fight the villain. But so, in a sense of time, because I kind of feel like we're talking in a lot of circles and we're not getting anywhere. Who are we giving this point to?
I would say I would give the points to Father. He is
I'm going to give 1 point to Dante, but we'll give 2 points to Father, because I think I think Dante is a more evil villain, whereas I think Father has some like very neutral alignment abilities. Dante is much more heavily on the evil spectrum, but I'll give Father more points. Fine.
All right. So, do we want to just go ahead, since we've been tiptoeing around him this whole time? You want to talk about Hohenheim?
Well, you've said we're going to talk about that later. We're going to talk about that later like 6 times. So I think if we don't talk about that would be.
I'm going to explode, because Hohenheim is actually one of my favorite characters from a literary standpoint. Hohenheim is such an interesting character in both series.
Okay.
So talking about the 2003 Hohenheim, same issue I have with him, I have with Dante, I have with Hohenheim, is that you don't really get a lot of him. You need more episodes, more screen time with him. Just like Dante is a more despicable villain, I think Hohenheim is a more despicable character. He is just about everything that Ed thinks he is. He does abandon his family. He does. He's kind of got.
But why does he abandon his family?
To try and stop Dante.
Right, because he knows that she's going to continue to make Philosopher's Stones, because actually, no, I'm sorry. Back up. I am Ladum. That's not why he leaves his family. His body is rotting, and he's trying to figure out a way to stop that, or he doesn't want his wife, who he loves,
Yeah, that's right.
the actual woman that he loves,
Trisha.
Excuse you, Dante. Get out of my way. We got Trisha Elric here. He's trying to figure out a way so that he doesn't rot and die in front of the woman that he loves. That's why he leaves in the original, because you see that scene where they're in bed and like his shoulders rotting, which connects back to when you see Dante's new body is rotting very quickly at the end. So he doesn't abandon his family. He's trying to figure out how to not rot and turn into a pile of stinking, rotting meat in front of his family.
Right, exactly. But it's this sense of, like, again, just like how Dante's reasons are very petty and personal, Hohenheim's reasons are very petty and personal. He feels like,
would you would call that petty?
I mean,
I'm
it's
leaving
vain.
my family so that I don't rot in front of them.
So I could continue figuring out how to live. Yeah, no.
But he doesn't want to.
But it's not, what I'm saying is that it's not grandiose. It's not this like big selfless act. That's a very selfish thing to do. Is like, I'm going to abandon my family to spend more time with my family. That it's a very human decision that he made. It's a very understandable, like, yes, if you're dying of this medical disease, you're going to do anything in your power to try to prevent it or to try to stop it, so you can have more time. But in that desperate pursuit, the same, alchemy can fix anything mindset that Ed has, his father Hohenheim has the same thing. I just don't know enough yet. Let me go find it out. And in his desperation to find out more, he wastes 10 years that he could have spent with his family, and ends up with this unbridgeable gulf between him and his children. Ed hates his guts now. He realizes the mistakes that he's made. He's regretful for it. He's a very human character in 2003.
I think that's a better description than you calling him petty, because that just I don't know, that word has really negative connotations.
That's fair. Maybe petty is
and
not
it's
the right
like
word.
No, petty would have been, hey, I'm going to leave you guys because I'm going to go find another woman who maybe is older and she'll die before I do. So it'll be all right.
But no, it's a very human reaction. Is what I think I'm trying to say here is that's a very human reaction. You do feel like this is just a guy who's in over his head and desperately trying to do whatever he can to set his wrongs right.
Well, and I think the original doesn't have Hohenheim as old as he is in Brotherhood. In Brotherhood, it's implied that he is near 1,000 years old because, the nation of Xerxes fell
thousands of years ago.
Basically, they don't really know a lot about it.
But long enough for it to fade into legend.
But in the few flashbacks that we get of Hohenheim and Dante, it doesn't seem like they're definitely old. I would say, give them a couple
maybe.
centuries. But they're not as old, and maybe that's also one of the big differences. Is Hohenheim has these several centuries rather than just a couple to get that old, wise, more hardened persona.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And he also doesn't have to, the Brotherhood version, he doesn't have to deal with the fact that his flesh is constantly rotting, and he has to, sacrifice humans to jump bodies. You really do get the sense in the 2003 show that Trisha humanizes him.
She's his lowest lane.
She's his lowest lane. Because before then it was him and Dante, lovers, constantly like sacrificing people and gaining more youth in order to live longer. But then he kind of grows sick and like I don't think I can keep doing this, and he meets Trisha. And that's when he has Ed now, and that's when he realizes, like, I can't keep doing this. Like,
it's not that he can't; it's he doesn't want to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, technically, quote unquote, he can. But when
physically
I say he
can't, but he doesn't want to.
He can't keep doing this. It would be worse than just letting his body turn to goo. So it definitely makes him a more human character. I think, full of flaws and ignorance and pain, and he doesn't always do the right thing in the 2003 show versus in Brotherhood. Like you said, he's got close to a millennia worth of experience, and he did make he didn't sacrifice a few people. He killed tens of thousands, tricked by Father in order to basically give them both immortal bodies. He goes off and founds the science of alchemy in order to heal people and make life better. He comes and meets Trisha Elric and settles down, has Ed now, and then he realizes that, oh, Father's not gone. I have to stop him or he's going to do this again. And so it becomes that to me is a selfless act of I have settled down, I have a family, I have kids, and I want to just be here with them. But I know that if I don't, then this great evil that I've helped create is going to murder everybody. And I have to abandon my family in order to stop that.
I wouldn't say selfless because he's still a huge asshole.
Oh, no, he's an asshole. He's totally an asshole in both.
But at the end of the day, I'm gonna give this point to Brotherhood Hohenheim because they had, again, it's because they had the source material. They actually knew what to do with Hohenheim.
Right.
Hohenheim in the original, he's literally he has 2 episodes. Like, they've built him up this entire series. He is in 2 episodes.
Like, oh, you're Hohenheim's kid? Oh, you're Hohenheim's kid.
And he does have a really big role in the movie. And the movie, The Conqueror of Shambhala, is canon. He does have a big role in that. But, well, I wouldn't say he has a big role, but the original does him better. Or sorry, Brotherhood does him better. He has that redemption he's able to go through. He has one of my favorite moments in Brotherhood, and that is where Pinocchio finds him sitting at Trisha's grave with the smile on his face. He's finally used up all of the Philosopher's Stone energy in his body. He used the last of it to protect his sons and fight Father. And he's finally able to die with a smile on his face. And that moment just
so beautiful.
Chokes me up every time.
It's a choke up. And not to mention the fact that he is definitely played up as a more compassionate character in Brotherhood, considering the fact that he learned the names of every single soul he absorbed, like all 6,000 or so of them.
He says he takes the centuries that he has them to talk to them and personally get to know them.
Every single soul that is now inside of his body and gets to know them personally, like by name. And like whenever he goes to use his power, he apologizes to them. Like, I'm sorry, I have to use your power, whatever your name is.
But at that point, they're all so willing to work with him and take out Father that they're like, nah,
they're like,
it's
whatever.
Cool.
As long as we kill that bastard, we're good. Like, use us however you see, as long as he dies at the end. They definitely pay him as more of like a compassionate hero character.
I also love the relationship that he's able to build with Alphonse in Brotherhood.
Oh, yes.
Because Alphonse, again, they do this little bit, but only for like 1 episode in the original. But Alphonse doesn't have this negative perception of his dad because he doesn't remember him. So that he's able to in both series kind of build a better relationship with his dad. But in Brotherhood, that's able to stretch out over several episodes, and he's really able to make this connection with his dad to the point where he finally says, look, Ed, I understand why you hate him, but I don't, because I don't remember who he was before me meeting him just now. They have the same relationship notes in both series. Ed hates dad, Al does not know dad, but it is much better drawn out to the point where I don't know if Ed can ever forgive his dad for leaving his mom to die, but I think he comes more to an understanding. It's kind of one of those, I understand why you did it, doesn't mean I have to forgive you, whereas he doesn't get that chance.
No.
But I think that's also better connected to Hohenheim's death in the original series, is that he doesn't get that good smile on my face death. He lets envy kill him because he says that's how he's going to atone for his sins. The sin of creating himself. The sin of creating envy, the sin of losing his original son was to let envy kill him. And I think that fits his character.
In the 2003 version. But it definitely does not fit his character in Brotherhood. So all this on the table, who are we giving the point to?
I already said we're giving it to Brotherhood.
We're giving it to Brotherhood. Yeah, no, he's a very solid character. I want to do a quick speed round before we finish the rest of the characters, because there's a couple of things I feel like we could just probably blast through. Obviously, the animation in Brotherhood is better than the original.
That's not a fair comparison.
But it's not a fair comparison. They had a bigger budget.
Why did you bring it up?
Because we had to touch on all points. We can't just talk about the characters. So obviously the animation is better. They have a bigger budget. They have more episodes, and they had newer techniques. So yes, the animation goes to Brotherhood. Music, I think is pretty. No, I love it. Actually, a note from Hunter, except for the rewrite opening. Which
rewrite is my favorite of any FMA opening, and the way he described it when we were watching it, when Arthur and I were watching it the first time, was he said when that show came out, that opening probably came out about 2004. The animation in the rewrite opening had no right to be as good as it was
Like
in
that
2004.
that was some like movie quality animation for that first like minute and a half for that opening. Like, it was insane. So apart from that one opening, obviously animation goes to Brotherhood. Music, to me, I think the music probably would go to the 2003.
Especially the background music.
Oh man, it sets the tone so perfectly.
There's a particular background song called, I think it's called Brothers, actually, that's on because I also have a copy somewhere of the original soundtrack, the background soundtrack.
That's cool.
It came with the Conqueror Shambhala
Okay, cool.
DVD. But there's that particular song that's not in Brotherhood, and it's such a shame because
it's so
the
good.
Background music is a lot better.
Absolutely.
Openings wise, again, I'm partial to the original because rewrite is my jam.
Great.
But they're both really
they
both great.
have absolute bops.
But I'm giving the music one to the original. I'm sorry.
I mean, it is the same reason why to tab real quick to Hellsing. Technically, yes, the Gothic choirs of Hellsing Ultimates, quote unquote, fit the mood better. But there's just something about that weird jazz guitar that plays every time Alucard appears in the original Hellsing. Just sets it. And so having
I've never seen the original
that unique music that plays and really does, for whatever reason, set this world apart. I love that. So yes, point to the original.
I just figured it out though.
Oh yeah.
So the original, again, we said tonally, it's more of a drama, it's more of a horror, it's more of a thriller. Yeah. So it has that more serious music. It has that, different kind of music. Whereas Brotherhood is a shonen anime, a shonen action anime. So it has very shonen like music
and background
within
music.
the show. Of course, the openings withstanding because they're all very unique. Mm-hmm. But it's also something we've heard before.
Yes. No, absolutely.
We've watched My Hero. We've watched Dragon Ball Z. We've watched Bleach, Naruto.
We're used to those types of openings and music. It is very much, it sets this unique
musical
precedent.
points to the original.
No, the original. There's a couple more characters that I really want to talk about. One is Scar and one is Mustang.
Oh, I want to talk about Scar first.
Let's talk about Scar.
Because I love Scar, or as he is known, I don't know his real name. You will Google if you have not done it.
I'm doing it right now because it's like 27.
I don't want to play it. We're gonna link. I'm
not gonna link it. I'm
below.
just going to try to.
But if you ever have the time, please Google Scar's real name. It's a short from the extras, the extra OVAs for Brotherhood, and it's beautiful because apparently Scar and King Bradley, before he was King Bradley, have the same name, and it's great. It's based off of a 4-panel comic strip that come at the end of the mangas, and it's great. But anyway, in the sake of time, Mr. Arthur.
Yes, I'm listening.
So talking about Scar, getting back to our topics. They are very different characters. They're also voiced by two different people, and that one I'm not sure why. I'd have to look into it. I know why Alphonse's voice actor doesn't come back, and we can talk about that when we get to the Elric brothers. But I'm just going to come out and say I think I like 03 Scar better. I think Brotherhood Scar could kick his ass.
Oh yeah, Brotherhood Scar in a death battle could absolutely wipe the floor with 03 Scar.
There's just something about Scar in the original that I just love so much more.
He is definitely a tragic fallen hero character. He is absolutely the rightful vengeance of his people, the Ishbalans. That he will stop at literally nothing to make sure Amestris pays. Mm-hmm. He is this terrifying force every time he's on screen. Nobody can stop him. And even in those few instances where he does actually get injured and has to run from a fight, like with the homunculi, you get this sensation that he's just going to come back Punisher style, more pissed off than ever.
One of the things, so at the end of Brotherhood, he gets kind of that redemption. And I do like that he gets a redemption arc. Now he's going for, because both Scars do end up in some way helping their people. Mm-hmm. Because in the original, it's heavily hinted that the people of Lior, which is the city where the Philosopher's Stone is created in the original, they are of the same maybe ethnicity as the Ishvalans are, because they have the same, they don't have the red eyes like the Ishvalans do, but they have the same skin color that the Ishvalans have. Or Ishbal if we're talking about the original. I'm not really sure what the localization change there for, but they, in Brotherhood, he gets that moment to work with Major Miles, who is one of Olivier Armstrong's people, to help establish better relations
between
and
the
living conditions for their people, because Miles is also Ishvalan.
But 2003 Scar would have had none of it. I mean, the only thing that fueled this man was spite and hatred for Amestris. And it kind of gives this weight to his sacrifice at the end, and how he dies, turning Al into the Philosopher's Stone. Basically, Al made him realize, wait a minute, I am on a fool's errand trying to burn down all of Amestris. There is hope, and it's in this kid. So I give my life and the people of Lior to him.
So before you interrupted me, as I was going to say, anyways, that one of the things that they also, I don't know, Scar viciously murders several people, and they're kind of just like, oh, let's just let bygones be bygones. Let's do better for our people. And I don't really like that I like that part for Scar where he does get the chance to help his people in a better way, because obviously viciously murdering people is not the right way.
Murder people.
But he doesn't really get any kind of comeuppance for that at the very end of Brotherhood.
Yeah, no, they like, well, you helped us defeat the big bad evil guy, so I guess we're cool now. And it's like,
which is a very shonen thing.
It's a very, very shonen thing. But like, no, this is a man that's absolutely guilty of war crimes. I mean, it is absolutely terrifying, just the amount of murder and how vicious he does as well. Although I will say my points for Brotherhood is that his backstory with his brother, I kind of like that a little bit more. The fact that his brother wasn't so, he died trying to basically perfect a new form of alchemy, with the tattoos on his arms, that his brother literally cut his own arm off and like sewed it onto scars.
That's also his backstory in the original, right?
But the his background was lust in the original.
So what is different about his backstory is what his brother was trying to do. In the original, his brother is trying to come up with that new type of alchemy to save his beloved. In Brotherhood, he's trying to come up with the new alchemy to save his country.
Ishval.
But the rest of Scar's backstory is the same.
But his relationship to his brother is different. His brother in the original was very small-minded. I'm just trying to bring the woman that I love back to life. Whereas his brother in Brotherhood is like, I'm trying to prevent the genocide of my people. Two completely different goals. One's, going back to what you were talking about, D&D alignment. One is more of an evil aligned goal, and one is most certainly a more good aligned goal.
But how does that affect your perception of Scar as a character? Because yes, those are two different characters and character traits, but
because in Brotherhood, he carries on his brother's will. For a lot of it, he really resents this arm that he has, and he goes, well, I hate alchemy. Alchemy killed my people, but I'm burdened now with this arm of my brother's, but I hate it because it's, forcing me to use alchemy. But if I have to use alchemy, I'm going to use it in order to take revenge. But then eventually he comes and reconciles, and they learn the other half of the alchemy tattoos that his brother was making, the destruction in his right hand, the creation in his left hand, and he comes to accept that part, and he's like, all right, brother, I will take on this role that you were desperately trying, and I will be that force that you wanted to be. There's this reconciliation that he has, this whole character arc that he goes through, when he just accepts that, okay, alchemy in and of itself is not an evil practice. He gets none of that in 2003. He gets none of that. He stays in that I must get revenge for my people mindset.
Yeah, that's true. Do you think that makes his Brotherhood counterpart a better character?
I definitely say that it gives him that redemption arc, because in Brotherhood he is a fallen hero that gets redeemed. In 2003 he stays that tragic hero. He stays that I don't even really want to call him an anti-hero. It's more like an anti-villain.
No, he's still an anti-hero.
I mean, in a certain degree, like, he has definitely been wronged, but could you really call him an anti-hero when his whole goal is genocide at the beginning? Eventually, of course, it changes when he decides to basically pass his to create the Philosopher's Stone and give it to Al.
Here's where I'm going to disagree with you. One, it's not genocide because he specifically targets state alchemists.
Okay, that's fair.
He does
That's
not
fair.
want all Amestrians to die. He
That's fair.
specifically targets state alchemists. That's why, like, yes, he does. He also murders their guards, but only if they get in the way. The other soldiers. So that's one.
And their soldiers.
And two, he also gets a redemption in 2003 because his goal was to pull the soldiers in, which I wouldn't call that genocide because I think that genocide is actually specifically the eradication of like a culture or a group of people, and I wouldn't call the military culture. But that's a whole philosophical debate I ain't getting into. But his goal was to do that and then create the Philosopher's Stone that he could use to take down the rest of the Mestrian military. But when he realizes that Alphonse is going to die, who is really in his mind an innocent that shouldn't have been brought into this, he says, "Okay, I'm going to sacrifice myself to save this kid. I know I'm not going to make it out of here alive, so I'm going to make sure that this kid makes it out of here," which means he is not going to get to see his end goal. Yes, the Philosopher's Stone is going to be created. He doesn't want to stop that, but it's now not going to be used the way that he wanted it to. He wanted to give it to the people of Lior so that they could use it to rise up against the government. He's got to know that if he gives it to Al, they're not going to do that.
Right.
They're going to, in his mind, even he might be thinking they're going to use it for their original goal, which was to get their bodies back. And I think that is his redemption. And I think that, at least the way that they build him up in the original, there would not be a let's come together and make better for our people, inside in the original. Him dying was the best way to end his character.
Yeah, okay. I can definitely see that. Not to say that Brotherhood, I think, did it in a particularly bad way. I do very much enjoy the way that Brotherhood handled his character. But having him, be this force of vengeance throughout most of it, and then realizing that my vengeance is not worth the death of a single innocent, I think that's a really good way to end his character.
I don't know what you're doing in your notes. I'm giving the point to the original.
Let's give the point to the original. You've convinced me. Point to the original.
Yes, I did. Oh, okay. So I didn't know this. So apparently the voice actor for Scar did not return for Brotherhood because he had other commitments. He was actually voicing Cell in DBZ Kai, which, if you're not familiar with that, that's the snipping out of all the BS in the original DBZ for that. And he also does younger Toguro in Yu Yu Hakusho, which is one of my favorite seasons.
Oh, no wonder why we love his voice so much.
Right.
Yeah, we can't really give I don't really think that we could give a point to either show based on the voice acting. Because the voice acting in both is stellar.
Oh yeah, it's incredible.
Both of them are top notch, tie 1 point each.
And I know we might get comments, but Vic Mignogna's in there. Okay, I'm not talking about the politics of Vic Mignogna. That we are not talking about politics on here. On this, at the time, the voice acting was good. I'm not going to excuse his action either way, but the voice acting he did at the time was good.
We're just talking about the quality of the voices of the roles, and Vic Mignogna is just one of very many voices in both shows, and every single voice in that show is done stellarly. Especially surprising considering the 2003 version came out before voice acting really became a serious profession here in America.
So we are getting pretty close to the
1 hour
end.
mark.
We've still got so much we want to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and call it and say we will do. It might not be as long of an episode. It might be a little mini episode, but there's still some more that we want to talk about. Specifically, I want to talk about the character deaths. We haven't even mentioned Nina or Shower Tucker. And we can't talk about FullMetal Alchemist without mentioning them. So you want to wrap it up here and save this maybe for a part 2 or a smaller part 2 episode? Maybe
a little smaller part 2. There's, like you said, there's a lot more that we want to talk about. I didn't even get to talk about one of my other favorite characters, Mustang, and again, you can't talk about FullMetal Alchemist without talking about Mustang.
So we've got to add some more of this into a second episode.
Part.
But that just means that you'll have to tune in for that next episode. Please look out for it in the next coming weeks. We are going to try to make this now a bi-weekly podcast, as much as, of course, our schedules will allow. But until then, thank you, Lords and Lovelies, for tuning into the Knights of the Round podcast. Please be sure to give us a follow, a subscribe, depending on the platform you are listening to. And the court is adjourned.
Thank you.